When my husband Jimmy and I were deciding on our vacation for this year, we had a little over 2 weeks' time, and we decided to book a Viking river cruise, and we'd done one last summer and just loved it. And then Jimmy had the really brilliant idea of saying, since we're going to take 2 weeks, why don't we do back-to-back river cruises, doing different itineraries, seeing different countries. I thought that was a fabulous idea, and so that is what we did. I'm Courtney Drake-McDonough, the publisher of RealFoodTraveler.com, a digital culinary travel magazine, and I'm host of the Real Food Traveler podcast. And my guest today is my husband, Jimmy McDonough, who is also Real Food Traveler's eco-friendly food travel and adventure editor, and my partner in travel, often. So today we're going to tell you about what it's like to do back-to-back river cruises with Viking, and also talk about the itineraries that we went on in brief to provide not only a little taste of what they're about, but also give some recommendations for what to make sure you see and do when you go to those. So, Jimmy, thank you for joining me for the podcast today.
Sure. Happy to be here, Courtney.
So we came into this particular first cruise was called the Rhine Getaway, and it went from Basel to Amsterdam. So we did indeed fly in once, arrived a day early, which I always recommend doing because things happen with airlines, as we all know and as all have heard, and we wanted to provide a little wiggle room in case something did go wrong with our flight. Thankfully it didn't, and so we ended up having a fun day in Basel. And then we did our own thing at the beginning, we did our own thing between the two cruises, and then we did a Vikings post-cruise excursion at the end of the second cruise, which we'll talk a little bit about. So we're able to talk to you today about what it's like to plan your own thing and to let Viking do all the planning. Let's talk briefly, Jimmy, and I'll let you go ahead about this, about the overall layout of the ship and what people typically can expect when they go on board.
Sure. So Viking is proud of their what they call long ships, and these are the river boats that they have on the rivers in Europe. And they're all consistently laid out. They're designed to be very similar one to the other. And the nice thing about that is that once you go on a Viking longship, you know where everything is on the next cruise. So it has typically a 3-level layout to the floor plan. There's the water level rooms, which is what we had on our Rhine Getaway. So basically you have a window that is long and narrow at eye level, and you're at the water level, so you can see all sorts of things happening, the ships going by, as well as the occasional swan or goose or some other kayaker or something. It's pretty cool. And then there's the French balcony. There's a veranda room with a full-blown patio, basically. And then the fancy schmancy explorer suites. So elsewhere in the public areas of the ship, there's a library, there's a lounge, there's what they call the Aquavit Lounge, which is an indoor-outdoor space. So that's really a wonderful place at the very front of the ship that sometimes you're able to sit outside and dine under the open sky or the awning, and on a summer day. It's very nice. There is a big dining room as well. On the very top of the ship, there is a big deck that goes from front to back, and these are very long ships, so it's a big area. Up there is a giant shade structure over half of it, as well as an herb garden, some outdoor games, a walking track, and then on the other portion of the upstairs deck, there are some tables and chairs and umbrellas where you can hang out and just enjoy the view as you go by. A very important part of the onboard experience, of course, is the food. So when you are sailing on Viking, they have 3 meals a day. They have a breakfast, which includes options like a continental-style breakfast. There's a buffet with all sorts of great stuff, healthy stuff, as well as pastries, one of my favorite parts. And they have a menu, so you can order off the menu something freshly made in the kitchen. There is lunch, terrific lunch, which in and of itself is a wonderful meal. And then at dinner time, you always have the option of their classic menu, which includes a steak, salmon, chicken, some real basic stuff, and that's consistent every dinner time. And then there's also a rotating menu of local specialty items, which was wonderful on the Rhine Getaway because, again, it was the cruise went from Switzerland to Amsterdam, so the chef tried to pick up on the local cuisine, the local culture each night of the cruise. There's also, so those are your 3 meals a day, and then there's a designated coffee, tea, snack area where you can make your own coffee, including lattes and cappuccinos and cocos and mochas, things like that, and as well as some nice little cookies or muffins, just depending upon the time of day. Another wonderful part of the onboard experience is entertainment. So this takes the form of lectures. Sometimes it's a staff person on the ship who's providing a cultural lecture. Sometimes they bring an expert on board in a port. There's also frequently musical entertainment. Again, they typically Viking brings local artists on board to give you a flavor of the culture of the area. And there are wonderful musicians and singers and dancers. There are also product demonstrations. So sometimes there will be a cooking demonstration, or other times there's a special beverage. So there's a nice variety of experiences that you can have on board when you want them. Certainly if you just want to hang out somewhere and watch the world go by, and you can do that, or if you want to read a book, if you want to check out a game from the library and play games with some fellow travelers or your own SOs or those who are accompanying you, that's fine too. So it's totally up to you how you want to structure your time on the ship. And then once a day as well in the evening, there is what they call the port talk, and that's where your program director provides you an overview of what's coming up in the next port that you stop at, and then that is typically, well, pretty much always, followed by the chef, the executive chef for your vessel. They come and provide a presentation on what is being served that night in the dining room, and they always provide some recommendations, typically based upon what they have crafted uniquely for the region that you're in, as well as local ingredients they may have picked up. So it's a really nice touch for those of us like Real Food travelers who really enjoy a good meal and want to learn more about the culture of the local region that you're traveling through. So we absolutely encourage you, if you're on a Viking cruise, to attend the port talk for a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah, they're very beneficial and interesting. All right, well, now let's talk about the itinerary. Again, this was called the Rhine Getaway. And something to know about Viking river cruises is, and probably other river cruises, is that the itineraries go both directions. So they pick up passengers, go one direction, upriver or downriver, drop them off, and their time ends, and then a new batch of guests come on. So we happen to be going in the direction of Basel to Amsterdam on this particular option we did. So as we go through this itinerary, we're going to touch on a little bit about each destination, what we liked or did, and something that we feel you shouldn't miss based on our experiences, something you should make sure you do when you go there. So, Jimmy, I'll let you talk about Basel.
Sure. Basel was a wonderful place to visit, a real surprise. It sits at the intersection of Switzerland, Germany, and France. So the local culture is truly a blend of those other cultures. And it had just a terrific, friendly, open, positive energy about it that I think we both really, really enjoyed. And what we liked there, so for me, one of the highlights was jumping in the Rhine River. So when we arrived in Basel, we immediately, after getting off the tram from the airport, we went over to this wall overlooking the city and the river itself, and we saw this flotilla, this wonderful, colorful flotilla of people floating down, just hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people. And it looked like such fun, and it was such a hot summer day. All I could think of was that nice cool water and jumping in it. So I eventually did do that, and I would highly recommend that. So that's one thing that we liked. Another thing that we liked were the meandering cobblestone streets in the Old Town section, where you could walk past these amazing half-timbered homes that were hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they're still in use and they're still in amazing condition. It's just a real living place. In other words, it's not just like a museum town or something that's put on display. People actually live here today as they did hundreds of years ago. And another terrific highlight that we liked in Basel were their fabulous free botanic gardens right there in the middle of the city. You can wander around, and it's just a lovely oasis in the heart of the city, especially on a hot summer day.
Mm-hmm. As for things not to miss, taking in the river atmosphere there, which Jimmy alluded to, whether you take a dip or you just observe people on the banks picnicking. Some of them go to a walk-up bar and then take their drink over to the river. There's a swim club not far from one of the places where the boat docks. And something to look for to eat is Flammkuchen, I think I'm pronouncing it right, which translates from German as flame cake. And it is said to be the beginning of the pizza craze. And Basel's variation is a thin, flat dough with toppings like bacon and onion. The major difference is it's not a tomato sauce base, it's a sour cream base. And Viking, sure enough, did a cooking demonstration on it on board and shared the recipe. So that was fun serendipity for us that we got to have it and then find out how it's made. The next stop was Breisach, Germany, which is the Black Forest. It's one of our about for this section is that it's one of the warmest parts of Germany across the river from France's Alsace region and wines. The included excursion from Viking took us by coach to a heritage center in the Black Forest, which is the inspiration from many fairy tales. The center had glassmaking, a shop to buy cuckoo clocks, a beer garden, and a cafe. What we did there was Jimmy went on a hike, which he'll talk about in a second. I watched a cuckoo clock making demonstration and watched the big life-size cuckoo clock outside on the side of a building, which was amazing to see, and a Black Forest cake making demonstration. But before we get into that deliciousness, Jimmy, do you want to say a word about that hike?
Yeah, it was just a brief hike out through this little cultural village, as it were, up into the Black Forest. And it was a real delight to do that. I love to hike here in Colorado or elsewhere, but it was not something that was too demanding, but there were parts that were quite steep and rocky. So if you do go on this hike, do be aware of that. But it's worth it because very quickly you're surrounded by beautiful old trees, very tall spruce and pine and fir and I don't know what else. The trail followed a little bubbling brook that was quite nice. We saw a couple of waterfalls. So it was a nice little way to get out there and experience just a touch of the Black Forest, the infamous Black Forest of Germany. So definitely would encourage that. But it sounds like that cuckoo making clock and Black Forest cake demonstration was great too, and I missed out on that.
Yeah. You in the cafe, and this is something I didn't do, they offer a Viking special, a Viking River Cruise special of, I don't know, I think it was €8 or €9, where you could get a slice of Black Forest cake and a drink. So the other fun thing there is that they have somebody doing a demonstration of how the cake is prepared. And for those not familiar with Black Forest cake, it's a multi-layer chocolate cake with a lot of whipped cream in between every layer and cherries, not cooked down cherries a little bit, and cherry brandy or like kirsch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a process to put it together. And so I got myself a front row seat, to watch this and be able to take a little video and take some pictures, which we'll share with everybody, about how they assemble it and how they do the chocolate shavings on top, which was quite dramatic, had a lot of flair. So when you go on this excursion, be sure you sit and stay for that demonstration, because it's very, very worth it. The next destination, the next port was Strasbourg, but you land on the German side in Kehl, Kehl. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. So Jimmy, tell everybody about the kind of complex history of Strasbourg.
Yeah, well, just briefly, Strasbourg sits right on the border of Germany and France, and over time, that border has gone back and forth, depending upon who has won what war or who has negotiated what terms. And so, of course, today Strasbourg falls primarily in France. And what I found fascinating is that the local region there, the local culture, is the Alsatian culture. And the individuals who are a part of that, they don't consider themselves German or French. They consider themselves first and foremost Alsatian. And they have their own food traditions and lots of other traditions. And that was quite eye-opening to learn about that. This incredible history has made it one of the official capitals of the European Union, which, again, was not something I knew. I thought it was all out of Brussels. And Strasbourg is just a beautiful place to visit. The old town, the canals, the half-timbered homes, and the just overflowing flowers and greenery. It was such a charming, lovely place that really, I think, stayed with us for a long. Still does. Still with us.
Definitely. As for what we did, the included excursion, and again, Viking provides an included excursion at every port, as well as some optional paid ones that you can do. The included ones are excellent, though. So we went on a walking tour and found out a lot about the history and saw just wonderful, charming things. And we went to the Strasbourg Cathedral, which is very important to the area, and it's just a stunning structure. It looks very skeletal to me in a way. It's just so old. I went inside it, and I saw the famous astronomical clock, which the mechanisms are said to be very unique, and it includes various styles and displays, such as a perpetual calendar. And it shows the position of the sun and the moon and what week it is and everything. It's very interesting. But while I was inside, Jimmy climbed it, climbed the outside, because you could buy a ticket and climb it. So he did that, and
which has great views, by the way.
Yeah.
And it was a very hot summer day, and I was afraid it was going to be just horrible, but it really wasn't that bad, because once you start climbing the stairway shaft, as it were, which is just a continuous spiral up and up and up and up, built in the Middle Ages, is very open. And once you get up, you start getting breezes, even on a burning hot day. It was over 100 degrees the day we were in Strasbourg. And then when you get to the observation platform, there was a nice breeze and incredible views of the old village, the old town of Strasbourg. I highly recommend it if you're up for it. It's a fascinating journey. There's also even a little museum up there on the platform of the Strasbourg Cathedral, talking about the history of that platform and the role it played in the history of the city. So it's a fascinating climb, well worth it.
One of the things we tell you to not miss there is the Alsatian pastries, including the Kugelhopf pastry. And Jimmy is the king of pastry lovers, and so he definitely sought that out. Yeah, baked goods.
Pastries, breads, yeah, they have great great pretzels there
Yeah.
in Strasbourg as well, in
Yeah.
addition to these wonderful Alsatian pastries.
And what was really nice was when we got on board and it was dinner time, that was German food night on Viking. And one night on every cruise, they do this amazing themed buffet. They do special table linens, and the servers wear special uniforms, and I can't believe the amount of food they do. And so on this first
Yeah.
cruise, it was all German food because we were in the Rhine region, and so we got to have Kugelhopf again there during that special dinner. All right. Well, the next port, and if you're counting, this is number four, the fourth stop we made, was in a place called Speyer, Germany. Speyer is a small city with a Romanesque imperial cathedral, and it's the burial place of multiple emperors, including some of the most famous Holy Roman emperors. And the cathedral is a UNESCO site. You see a lot of UNESCO sites on these Viking tours, which is amazing. Speyer is also known as a place where the name Protestantism was born. So it's a place of major historical significance, and it also includes strong Jewish heritage and history. What we did, we did a walking excursion, and had free time on Main Street, which had a lot of colorful buildings, and we got pastries, of course.
Duh.
Yeah. Do note that some of the shops don't take credit cards, so ask before you start finding treasures that you will just have to leave behind, like I had to with a really fabulous dress, because you don't have enough euros. On board, Viking did a demo with making Rudesheim coffee, which was paired with the afternoon tea service, because once on every cruise they have this wonderful proper tea service. And that was in advance of docking in Rudesheim. So they showed us, it's this wonderful boozy coffee topped with whipped cream, and it was really yummy. So we started the day in Speyer, but ended in early evening in Rudesheim. And James did a gondola ride there, which he'll tell you about.
Yeah, that was totally unexpected. So we left Speyer after a fairly short visit and cruised down the Rhine to this wonderful, wonderful town called Rudesheim. And I thought of it as sort of the Napa or Sonoma of Germany, or at least this part of Germany. Just a wonderful town. And rising out of the heart of it, out of the old town, is a gondola that goes to the top of a nearby hill over the vineyards on the hills. And at the top of the gondola, at the top of the hill, is a visitor center with a cafe, incredible views of the Rhine, and this magnificent, gigantic sculpture that was erected to celebrate the unification of Germany, and to celebrate its victory over the French, which is a big deal in German history, the battles between the Germans and the French. Anyway, it was spectacular. And if you go to Rudesheim, I would highly, highly encourage you to take that gondola ride up to the top. And then when I was up at the top and it was time to come back down, I was actually up there with my sister, who had accompanied us on this cruise, and she and I walked back down through the vineyards on the path, and that was a wonderful experience too, to be able to really get up close to the vineyards of the Rhine Valley, and then come back into Old Town Rudesheim, and I highly encourage that.
Yeah, I neglected to mention that Jimmy's sister and her husband were also on this cruise with us, and this was their first time doing a river cruise, and they just loved it. Our next stop was in Koblenz, Germany. This was the day we went through the Middle Rhine with all the castles, and I'll be honest with you, this day was my main motivation for choosing this itinerary. And the Viking folks will be very honest with you and say, this is the commercials. This is when you see a Viking commercial and all those castles and it's just so gorgeous. It's this region primarily that you're seeing. So everybody was very excited, and everybody got up on the top sun deck. And the program director provided narration, which was a wonderful surprise. I didn't know that was going to happen, about what these different castles were and a little bit of history about them. And they also gave us a printout that kind of helped us know. So we do recommend sitting on the sun deck to be up top, so that you're able to see on both sides, because there is something to see on both sides of the ship. Make sure you note the vineyards on the really steep slopes that are all harvested by hand, which can be very dangerous for the people, as you can imagine. I don't know how they do it, but it's how they've been doing it for centuries. And this area is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So as for what we did the historic Koblenz walking tour. Again, the included excursion. And Jimmy, the stumble stones were something that were really, it was really poignant. Can you tell everybody about those?
Yeah, so these stumble stones are found in a variety of areas and towns and cities in Germany as well as elsewhere, including Amsterdam, as we discovered. So the stumble stones are a memorial to the local Jewish individuals and families that were taken from their homes and put in concentration camps. And they are placed typically in front of the homes where they used to live, and they're made to look like cobblestones. They're actually made out of brass, and they are set into the ground and a little bit higher typically than other cobbles. And the idea is that for those of us today, when we come upon them and perhaps stumble a little bit over them, it catches our attention and then when you look down, you can see the stumble stone is inscribed with the name of the individual or individuals who lived there, and some dates of when they were taken from their homes. So it really is a very humbling type of experience to come across that in your tours. And so we were first introduced to that here in the historic Koblenz area.
Yes, definitely. After the tour, we stayed in town to walk around on our own, and there's a gondola there that goes over the river over to a historic fort. And our tour guides are great for giving little tips about, places to go eat and things to do. And she had mentioned that if you get tickets for, I think it was after 5:30 at night or something, for the gondola, that they were much less expensive. Yeah. So we bought our tickets in the afternoon, went back to the ship, had lunch there, and then came back in town and indeed did do that early evening gondola ride before, and we're back in time for the port talk and in time for dinner. So that was really great. So definitely our don't miss is take that gondola. Also see the spitting fountain, which is located in one of the squares, and there's a whole story about that, but briefly, it's a little boy, a naughty little boy at the top of this fountain who every minute or so spits out water a long distance. And if you didn't know what was happening, you would get wet. And if you do know what was happening, like Jimmy, you would stand exactly in the right spot so that you could be sprayed with water and get cooled off. It was hot.
And the water was nice and cool.
Yes, so that
it was refreshing.
naughty little spitting boy fountain is something to make sure you see.
One thing I will mention as well about that gondola ride is if you go later like we did, the fort and the museum up at the top of that cliff is not open.
Right.
So if you really are interested in exploring the fort and the museum, then you do need to go earlier. We wanted to go up there, frankly, just to have a view of Koblenz and the Rhine from up above and just wander around a bit. So that worked for us just fine. But do be aware of that.
Our next port, I think it might have been my favorite. It was Cologne, Germany. The centerpiece of Cologne is the Cologne Cathedral, which was begun in around 1248 and took 7 centuries to complete, which just blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It was all began to house the stolen relics of the bones of the Magi, the 3 kings who visited baby Jesus. As you can imagine, the cathedral is under almost constant repair and renovation because of its age. There are Roman ruins throughout Cologne, and there are plazas and pedestrian-only shopping areas. What we did there was a walking tour, really great one. Then we wandered around on our own. When that was over, it happened to be Gay Pride Fest time, which is the largest celebration in Europe, I think they told us. We took the advice of our guide and got a Kolsch beer, lunch of raw minced pork on with onion on a roll, which was delicious, a salad, and the most amazing potato soup at a place called Peter's Brauhaus. Then we got a fried potato pancake at another place that our guide had recommended. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but I will include the link for it.
Yeah, those are local specialties.
Yeah,
by the
local
way.
specialties at local places. As for our don't miss, James, tell them a little bit about Kolsch beer.
Yeah, so Kolsch beer is something very special to Cologne. It's actually the only place in the world that is truly known as the home of Kolsch beer. It's sort of like Champagne in France, that true champagne can only come from the Champagne region in France. Kolsch beer originated in this region in Cologne, and even though you will find Kolsch beer all over the world, including here in Denver, the true stuff really is Cologne, Germany. They just didn't put a trademark on it, apparently. That's why Kolsch is known and brewed elsewhere with that name. But it is a wonderful, light, refreshing beer to have, especially on a hot summer day like it was when we were there. A real helpful tip when you go to a brewery or a bar in Cologne and you order a Kolsch is that you need to put your coaster on top of your Kolsch glass. Otherwise, they're going to keep bringing you more Kolsch beer as you drink it down, and your glass becomes empty. If you don't put a coaster on top, the signal is we want more. So if you've had enough, put a coaster on the top of your Kolsch. And by the way, when you clink, when you cheers each other, you actually clink the bottom part of this glass, because the Kolsch glass is a special shape. It's like a test tube. And the bottom of it is a thick glass base. And that's what you clink, because if you clink the upper part of the glass, it might break. Mm-hmm. So, and I believe the cheers there was Skål?
I don't remember.
Prost. Maybe it was Prost.
I don't remember.
I think it was Prost.
Yeah. And something important to tell people is that those refills are not free.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
yes.
This is not Coca-Cola. This is
yeah.
They will keep charging you for them.
And it's quite reasonable. I think it was where we were, it was 4 or 5 euros each. But yeah, that adds up. That definitely adds up. Yeah. And I know there was another don't miss in Cologne. I'm going to let Courtney describe that, because I think you were wowed by that. I was. Our tour guide at the end of the tour brought out this little perfume bottle, and he offered to spritz any of us that wanted spritzing. And of course I did, because I love perfume. But it was a sample of Farina Eau de Cologne, which is said to be the first cologne, and it was created in 1709 by Johann Maria Farina. And it's always been a unisex fragrance
made with citrus and bergamot and other fragrances, and it was divine. And we went and sought it out at the House of Farina there, and bought a little bottle that we share. In fact, we put some on yesterday, the two of us. So the House of Farina's there in Cologne, and it's sold and crafted there, and that's been happening in the same house by the same family for hundreds of years.
Yeah, and you can
generations.
actually, at that House of Farina, they actually have a little museum, and you can take a tour, and the tour guide is dressed up in period costume from the 1700s, excuse me. So we didn't have the time for that, but I would highly recommend doing
Yeah,
that. That looks like a lot of fun.
I would have loved to have done that.
Yeah, Cologne was a delight.
Yeah. All right, our next stop, next port was Kinderdijk in the Netherlands. So here we were in another country. So we started in Switzerland, then we were in Germany, and then we were in the Netherlands.
And a little bit in France.
Yeah, a touch. That's right, Strasbourg. Yeah, depending on what day it is, it was
Right.
France. No, I'm kidding. So I actually, to be honest, I stayed on board because I had a really bad headache that day. But Jimmy went into Kinderdijk, and so I'll let him take over for this part.
And that's a shame that you weren't able to go in, Courtney, because it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So Kinderdijk is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's a place of windmills, basically. You know, the Netherlands is the Low Country, and the purpose of the windmills is to pump water up out of the fields and then into canals where the water is then taken away and eventually dumped in the ocean. So the idea is to use the power of the wind to move water so that they can create arable land. And they've been doing this for over 750 years. Imagine that, 750 years. Such an amazing history. So the excursion through Viking today was an exploration of this heritage site called Kinderdijk. In addition to that, I also took advantage of a paid excursion, which included a visit to a cheesemaker. And we call that cheese Gouda, but in the Netherlands, the pronunciation is, now, wait for it, it's Gouda. Gouda. You got to get that. Gouda. So we visited this place called Boy, and it was spelled Booj, but in Dutch it's pronounced Boy. And it's a wonderful artisanal cheese manufacturing farm, basically, that's run by a mother and daughter. They're the 6th and 7th generations of Gouda makers. And it was a wonderful excursion where we got to walk through the entire process, which I had no idea how cheese was made, and it was so eye-opening. And we were able to taste different cheeses that had been aged at different durations, as well as some flavored Gouda. It was a terrific, beautiful place to visit. Part of the excursion was driving through the countryside, which was just so beautiful, so green. There are swans milling about and the occasional windmill, and just a beautiful, charming landscape that was really, really terrific. And again, it then ended at this official Kinderdijk location where we hooked up with other visitors from the ship who didn't go on the optional excursion. And then we had a guided excursion through Kinderdijk, which included going into one of the windmills and learning about how people lived in there, and how they raised their families and their children, and how dangerous it was because there's a giant windmill swinging around out the front door. It was absolutely fascinating, and so do not miss the Kinderdijk excursion, and I would highly encourage you to go and learn about Gouda making in the beautiful countryside of the Netherlands.
Through that paid excursion.
Right.
Yeah, that was the add-on. All right, the last place that the ship docked was Amsterdam
Yeah.
in the Netherlands.
The cruise ended.
Yeah, that's where cruise number 1 ended and disembarked. We went it on our own, but there were other people from our journey who did Viking's add-on. And I don't know what all exactly that entailed, except we ran into them,
Yeah.
groups of them, a couple of times. And one of the places we ran into them is the Rijksmuseum, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, I'll let Jimmy talk about the about of Amsterdam.
Yeah, so Amsterdam is an absolutely fascinating place. It's so super modern. In the port area where you land, where the boat, the Viking longboat docks, there's very modern buildings all around there, and a skyline that could be that is as modern as any other city. But very quickly, once you walk over or take one of the trams into the center city, you are absolutely transported to a whole different world, into the older historic section of Amsterdam. Something to be very, very cautious about, I cannot emphasize this enough, are the killer bikes and the killer trams. Amsterdam is very, very congested and busy, and there is a culture there of bike dominance. So in other words, people are riding bikes, the locals especially, and they ride with a purpose, and they do not tolerate anyone getting in their way. So they actually legally have the right of way, not the pedestrian. So when you are walking around and you're just spellbound by the architecture and the beauty of Amsterdam, please watch where you're going, look both ways for the bikes as well as the trams. There are loads of trams going back and forth. The public transportation system there is amazing, but it can be very dangerous if you're not careful. So that's my one word of advice for you to survive and thrive on your visit in Amsterdam.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to let you also talk about the Rijksmuseum and the Van Gogh Museum.
Yeah, so we had heard that the do not miss activities in Amsterdam included a visit to the Rijksmuseum as well as the Van Gogh Museum and the canal cruises to see the city from the canals, which of course Amsterdam is most known for. So the Rijksmuseum is an incredibly huge museum. From the outside, it just didn't seem that big, but once we got in there, it just seemed to go on forever and ever and ever. The collection is vast. We spent probably 2 hours there and didn't see everything, not by a long shot. The Night Watch is the famous painting from Rembrandt. There are loads of Rembrandt paintings in there, and the Night Watch is perhaps the best known. It's under restoration now, and it's in a special room, and you're very far removed from it. So frankly, that was kind of an anticlimactic moment for me. What was not, however, was our visit to the Van Gogh Museum. Now, I am partial to Van Gogh, the artist, and his story. And this museum really, really moved me from the perspective of how it told the story of his life and the story of his art, and the relationship in particular with his brother and his brother's wife. So heartwarming and devastating all at the same time. And of course, the art, Van Gogh's art. There's a lot of his most famous work that is elsewhere in the world. It's not all here. However, that doesn't diminish what is there, because what is there is incredible, and there are some lesser known works, at least to me. I'm not a scholar of Van Gogh, but there are some works of his that I had no idea that he had attempted. Some had Asian influence, for example, well, Japanese specifically, which I found fascinating. So I personally just absolutely loved the Van Gogh Museum and that experience there. And I, for those of you who are interested in him, it's a must-see. And on top of that, they had a wonderful cookie in their gift shop, or in their not a gift shop, but their little cafes. There's 2 cafes in the museum.
That was the best cookie.
It was so good. It was so cute and so pretty. It was kind of modeled after a sunflower, and it was chocolate with chocolate goo on the inside and little pistachios on top, I think.
Or sunflower seeds.
Oh, maybe that would make more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was delicious. So, another do not miss is the stroopwafel. So the stroopwafel is something that I think the Netherlands as a whole is known for, and certainly in Amsterdam, there are loads of bakeries, shops that have stroopwafel, and we would encourage you to find a place that makes them fresh to order. We were fortunate enough near the Rijksmuseum to stumble upon a charming little cafe called Stro & Co., and a delightful young lady made us a fresh stroopwafel right in front of us. And with our choice of fillings, we went with a classic caramel. And oh my gosh, that warm stroopwafel in your hand with a cup of coffee. It was such a wasn't it? Am I overstating it?
No, you were not. You were not.
Okay.
It was amazing. It was amazing. And we, I do want to mention that Jimmy had the forethought to get tickets for the Rijksmuseum and the Van Gogh Museum ahead of time, like months before, when we were still here in Colorado. And I was so glad he did that, because we saw people in line and in line and in line and in line.
Well, and some were turned away.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
They sell out for the Van Gogh in particular.
Yeah.
So absolutely buy your tickets far in advance.
Yeah, we walked right past all these sad people who had to be turned away. So I was really glad he did that. And you did the same for the canal tours. And we did 2, one during the day and one that we figured was going to be more evening.
Right.
It was like 5 something, but because at that time of year, it doesn't get dark till 10 at night.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, more daytime, but okay.
Yeah, we thought we'd see the canal experience during the day and at night with the lights. And it kind of was the same experience.
Well, except it was through different companies and different tour guides, and they actually took us down some different canals and told us some different things. So I feel like we got, between the 2, we got a really thorough canal experience, which
absolutely.
was really fun.
I don't regret either one.
Yeah.
But I was hoping for a little bit more romantic, like, night city lights. But they eventually did turn on some lights, so there were some accent lights on the canals that made the second one at night a little bit more special.
Yeah.
Too, so.
It was
But
really
a canal ride is something I would highly encourage.
We did end up doing, because you can do covered, some canal companies, there's a bunch of canal companies and different kinds of canal boats, and some are covered. Some of those I think wouldn't be great because you can't see up so well, because you're down in the canal, you're below ground, and these buildings go way up high. They're multiple stories. So in a way, the covered ones are a disadvantage, I think, because you can't see everything. And so we were in open air ones, which got a little chilly at times, but it was totally worth it because we had completely free views of everything.
And they do have umbrellas.
Yeah.
So, which it did rain on us when we were in Amsterdam after the heat of the Rhine up in Germany. It did actually cool off dramatically in Amsterdam, and it rained on us a bit. So, but it still was a terrific experience to be on the canals and see 360 without, like you said, anything in your line of vision.
Yeah. Our time in Basel was on our own prior to the cruise. Our time in Amsterdam was on our own prior to the cruise. And we did okay. There was some problems with transportation and, was it going to come, and a little bit of stress
Yeah,
getting
a
from
few
here and
hiccups.
there. Our hotel wasn't exactly what it looked like it.
No, it wasn't.
It was okay, but it was not what was represented on Hotels.com by the hotel. It wasn't Hotels.com's fault, but it was a little iffy. The whole thing was a little bit iffy, and this is only part one of two parts, two podcasts we're going to do. We're saving the second cruise for a separate podcast for you, so you don't get totally overwhelmed. But we'll talk about how our time in Paris went awry as we were going it on our own. We still had a fabulous time with all of it, doing the things we did on our own, and certainly the time we had with Viking, where they just take care of everything. You just every little detail is taken care of, which we just grew to appreciate more and more with every passing day. So we will have an associated article with all of our podcasts with Real Food Traveler. We have an article that goes along with these podcasts on our site that will have links to things and some photos of things we've been talking about here today on the podcast. We also have a big article that goes over the very practical side of what you need to know to do back-to-back river cruises with Viking. Having lived through it and having done a lot of studying up ahead of time, I know so much about packing now because of all the studying up I did. We have some really great tips to pass along to you that will make your experience less stressful, easier, happier, and allow you to have more energy to just enjoy the wonderful experience. So stay tuned for part 2 of this podcast, when we'll tell you about that second cruise, which was completely in France from Lyon to Avignon, plus our cruise extension with Viking to Aix-en-Provence. So thank you to my dear husband, Jimmy, for joining me today and being a great travel partner always. And thanks to Viking River Cruises for hosting us for portions of our back-to-back river cruise adventure. For more information about Viking River Cruises, visit vikingrivercruises.com. And to read our articles and to listen to the Real Food Traveler podcast, visit realfoodtraveler.com. Real Food Traveler podcast is also available wherever you like to stream podcasts, including iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Overcast, and many more. Thank you so much for joining us today, and stay tuned for part 2 of our Viking River Cruise back-to-back cruise adventures.